For the longest time, hip-hop artists have used their music to throw shade and stir up beef with their ops, and Chicago rappers are no different. The issues between warring gangs have led to a ton of bloodshed on the streets over the years, but it has rarely stopped there. Both sides have threatened ops in their tracks and have even gone to the extent of dragging the names of the dead through mud. It has been one of the defining characteristics of the Chicago drill rap scene. Some of those lyrics and verses have left listeners asking themselves if what they heard actually happened. Lil Durk, aha. When it comes to drill rap, there are few names more recognizable than Lil Durk, and a lot of people would say that he is as controversial as he is recognizable. Over the years, Durk has gone after his ops on a couple of occasions, but these bars from his track, Aha, which dropped in February 2022, really stand out. He rapped, "Don't respond to with Von. Yeah. I'm like, it. You tripping, go get your gun. Let's get it, get gunned." The threats of violence are honestly not that surprising, but what immediately captures listeners' attention in those lyrics is the mention of King Von, because that makes things a little more interesting. Both men had spent a long time together as members of the Black Disciples, so it is easy to understand why Durk was still hurting. But to really understand the significance of these lyrics, we have to go back to the early hours of November 6, 2020, the night of King Von's death. It was reported that Von got into an altercation with another rapper, Quando Rondo's crew. According to Rondo, the entire thing came out of nowhere. In an interview, he said, "I'm not about to try and go through these people or nothing like that. Next thing you know, a hit me. I lied to you not. It's like I had an out-of-body experience." Rondo was just there when it happened. The man who pulled the trigger was Lil Tim, who had signed with NBA Youngboy's record label Never Broke Again around roughly the same time. This was a pretty big deal in this entire saga, because Von had a lot of beef with Youngboy before his death, so everyone mentioned so far was connected. Durk was tight with Von, who had beef with Youngboy, who had just signed Tim, Von's shooter, to his record label. You don't need a PhD to know that with so much bad blood, retaliation had to be on the table. And Durk's track Aha was a warning shot fired not just at Lil Tim, but Rondo and Youngboy as well. To top all of it off, Durk did this despite being NLE Choppa telling him not to go after anyone linked to Von's death. While speaking about why he talked Durk down in an interview, Choppa said, "I'ma be there personally to let you know, bruh, that this cycle we in as black men is a never-ending cycle. Cause at the end of the day, bruh, we one person. We got one conscious mind." But with this track, Durk had thrown all of that out the window, putting everyone associated with Von's death on notice. But luckily, cooler heads eventually prevailed. A little more than a year after Aha dropped in May 2023, it was reported that Youngboy and Durk had officially squashed their beef. This was a really significant moment for both men because usually, situations like this keep escalating until someone's blood is spilled, sparking a cycle of violence with no end in sight. Regardless, that doesn't change the fact that at one time, Durk was ready to wage war on Lil Tim and maybe even Youngboy, all for King Von. FBG Duck, dead bitch. If FBG Duck had never dropped Dead Bitches, then there is a very real possibility that he would have been alive today. Duck was a member of the Gangster Disciples, and if you know your Chirac history, then you also know that the GDs have been at odds with the Black Disciples for decades. Both gangs had spilled a ton of blood over the years, and with the rise of drill rap, had used music as just another way to mock their ops. It's just one of those things that is widely accepted when it comes to the genre. But there have been a number of instances when an artist has gone too far, and that was exactly what happened with FBG Duck and Dead Bitch. While the entire track was a diss aimed at the Black Disciples, there was one lyric in particular that stood out. In the song Duck rapped, but T-Roy and Odie, them dead bitches. Both T-Roy and Odie Perry were members of the Black Disciples before their deaths. The name Odie Perry probably rings a bell for a lot of people familiar with the Chicago drill rap scene. Perry was just 20 years old at the time of his death in August 2011. His death had hit his friends hard, and a sect of the Black Disciples had its name changed to O-Block in his honor. While the BDs honored him, the GDs would often drag Perry's name through the mud in their tracks. T-Roy might not be as familiar a name, but he was just as important to the Black Disciples as well. His death in 2017 was especially difficult for guys like King Von and Chief Keef because Roy had been tight with both of them. As a matter of fact, Roy was actually King Von's best friend and one of the gang's heaviest hitters, taking out several ops over the years. There was a bunch of other stuff that had gone down between Duck and the Black Disciples, specifically King Von, but I'm not going to get into that right now. The point is that by the time Dead dropped, Duck's ops were probably just looking for a reason to take him out, and the song gave them what they were looking for. As shocking as the lyrics in the track were, Duck's death on August 4th, 2020 was far more horrifying. That afternoon, the rapper was taken out in broad daylight, getting shot multiple times, with his girlfriend and an innocent bystander also getting caught in the middle of the bloodshed. The crazy thing about all of this is that Duck potentially knew that he had a massive target on his back, with police records revealing that he had been leery of letting people know his whereabouts because he had received death threats from opposing gang members in the drill rap scene. This track was directly linked to Duck's death, with an FBI affidavit basically confirming that the rapper had spoken about dead ops in a degrading manner. The rapper dissed his ops one time too many, and it cost him his life. King Von had been heavily linked to the rapper's murder as well, before he died in a shooting as well, just a couple of months later on November 6, 2020. Yak Yola feat. King Von, Slide. As I had mentioned earlier, artists from the Gangster Disciples and Black Disciples will never pass up an opportunity to diss their ops, even if they are dead. And that was exactly what King Von did when he featured on Yak Yola's track titled Slide. The song dropped in early October 2020, and even though it had just been a few weeks since Duck was murdered, Von went right after him. He rapped, "That made a song called Slide, and he be hiding now, don't let us find out." It doesn't immediately look like Von is dissing Duck, but Slide was also the name of one of the GD rapper's most successful tracks. Duck's Slide had dropped back in late 2017 as one of the songs on his album, This How I'm Coming. Von's diss was all about doubling down on hurting Duck. He may have passed away by that point, but his ops could still continue dragging his name down into the dump. The interesting thing about the long-standing feud between Von and Duck is that there was actually a point when both men used to be friends, but then things turned sour. When they ended up on opposing gangs, it just ensured that there would be no way in hell they would ever reconcile. But to really understand just why both rappers would be mortal enemies till the very end, we have to go back to 2011 to the death of O.D. Perry. Almost immediately after his death, a member of the Gangster Disciples named Gakira Barnes started dropping a bunch of hints that suggested she had taken him out. 3 years later, Barnes would be shot down by a man who would later be revealed to be King Von. What a lot of people might not have known at this point was that Barnes had been tight with FBG Duck. They were so tight that he might have actually been the getaway driver when Barnes took out Odie. There isn't much definitive evidence, but security camera footage from the shooting captured someone in an orange t-shirt behind the wheel. There is no way that Duck been wearing an orange t-shirt earlier in the day was just a mere coincidence. The kicker was that it was revealed Von had allegedly put a $100,000 bounty on Duck in the weeks leading up to his death, and even bought everyone in O-Block a gold chain after the daylight shooting in August 2020. The GD rapper would find some sense of justice after his death though, as in October 2021, the FBI would arrest Charles C. Murda Liggins, Kenneth Kenny Robertson, Carlos Los Offord, Christopher C. Thang Thomas, and Marcus Muwop Smart in connection with the murder. About a year and a half later, a sixth man named Ralph Turpin would also be arrested in April 2023 and charged with murder in aid of racketeering and conspiracy to commit murder in aid of racketeering. It isn't much consolation, but at least someone has been brought in and charged with the murder. That definitely would not have happened about a decade ago, when people would be murdered in and around O-Block on a pretty regular basis. But law enforcement would not arrest anyone or even manage to find a murder weapon. This puts those 6 arrests into perspective, and it is a really big deal. Lil Durk, computer murderers. When it comes to the Chicago drill rap scene, there are hardly any names more influential than Lil Durk. And when he was really feeling it, no one could touch him when it came to dissing ops. He dropped Computer Murderers back in March 2022, and in just the first 4 lines of the first verse, the Black Disciples rapper managed to diss 3 guys. Here's how it went. "Check on your mans. I heard he got hit in his head, but he almost died so I can say his name cause he ain't dead. How you let a vouch for you who just got out the feds? Sneaking pics by Von Morale like Lil Bro won't come out and spin." All right, let's break it down. The reference to someone getting hit in the head is a diss aimed at FBG Whiskey, a member of the Gangster Disciples. Back in October 2018, Whiskey was attending a friend's funeral when a gun pulled up and opened fire. 6 people in total were hit, including Whiskey, who was shot in the head. But miraculously, he managed to survive. The track was called Computer Murderers in response to a song Whiskey had released in early January 2018. That song was just called Computers. In it, the rapper had dissed multiple members of O-Block with insults scattered throughout. One of the standout disses was, "Fo Nim stood over J Money and put 4 in his grill for real. Now go ask Lil Boo how that hot shit feel." J Money was a member of O-Block and was shot down back in September 2013 when he was just 21 years old. He was a big player in the crew, often getting his hands dirty and taking care of business for the block. As a matter of fact, after his death, Durk had tweeted saying, "Rip J Money, we just lost a savage who put tears in family, you ain't never forgotten. After seeing how Durk was personally affected by Money's death, it makes sense that he would want to go after Wooski with a diss track of his own. But Money wasn't the only man insulted in those two lines. Lil Boo was one of the biggest players in the formation of Team 600, another set of the gangster disciples. Boo had been shot down near his hood in 2015, after spending most of 2012 to 2014 in prison. The rest of Wooski's track would also see him diss Odie Perry and of course say stuff like O-Block. Anyway, going back to Durk's song, in the third line, how you let a vouch for you who just got out the feds? The rapper decided to go after NBA Youngboy. He had supported FBG Wooski in one of his tracks, and at the time had been released on house arrest while awaiting trial. In the final line, which referenced a King Von Morale, Durk fired a shot at FBG Cash, who had recently taken a photo in front of the rapper's mural in O-Block. Cash would not take the diss lying down and release a track of his own, with a title that might seem a little familiar. Meanwhile, Durk remains one of the biggest names in the Chicago drill rap world, though he has been dealing with some health issues as of late. He had to cancel a number of shows in July 2023 because he was hospitalized due to severe dehydration and exhaustion. FBG Cash, computer murderers. One thing about King Von and Lil Durk most people overlook is that they were practically like brothers. So when FBG Cash decided that he was going to respond to getting dissed, he knew where to hit Durk to make him hurt. To avoid absolutely any confusion over who he was addressing, Cash named his song Computer Murderers as well, in which he rapped, "Check on your cousin, I forgot his ass was dead. Fun'em filled his ass with lead. I bet they ain't forget that head." The track, which dropped in the first half of 2022, brought up rough memories of King Von's death for Lil Durk. Just a couple of months after FBG Duck was murdered, Von was partying at a club in Atlanta, Georgia. According to reports, Quando Rondo had been chilling with his crew in the parking lot nearby when he was jumped by Von. As per the claims of a witness who saw everything go down, Von threw a punch at Rondo, which set everything off. A member of his crew, Lul Tim, was the man who fired the killing shot. The fact that Von was the aggressor was enough to ensure that Tim would have any charges against him drop. As a matter of fact, his lawyer even said, "Here there are reports that prosecutors believe this to be a case of self-defense and thus reportedly decided to drop the charges." Throughout the entire ordeal, Tim maintained that he made a split-second decision to protect himself and his crew and that there was nothing premeditated about shooting Von. He gave an interview while he was out on bond saying, "The thing is,
shit, no matter where you at, like, no matter any part of the world, somebody gonna do a goddamn, like, anywhere in the United States, anywhere, any country, on the earth."
That Von always had a reputation for being violent and full of anger. I have already mentioned that he was responsible for the murder of Gakira Barnes, but that is just one of many. The documentary titled King Von Rap's First Serial Killer linked the rapper to several murders. Sure, the documentary was really controversial, and some of the links are a stretch at best, but the very fact that something like this even exists suggests that Von would definitely be someone who would launch a random attack on a guy in the middle of the night. The only difference this time was that it cost him his life. Now let's get back to FBG Cash. He had a habit of running into trouble with the police. In addition to being arrested on gun charges a while ago, he was picked up in 2021 for driving erratically with a gun in his car. The rapper was charged with being an armed habitual criminal, aggravated unlawful use, and felony possession of a weapon. The case would end up being dismissed in the fall, but Computer Murderers would be one of his last ever projects. The song was released in late March 2022, and he was murdered in early June of the same year. According to the news, the rapper had been driving at 5:30 in the morning with a woman when he was cut off by a Cadillac. Two men jumped out of the car and opened fire. The woman was shot in the left arm and upper back, while Cash was hit a total of at least 13 times. When law enforcement arrived at the scene, they discovered 23 bullet casings, with 14 of them belonging to a rifle. He was 31 years old at the time of his death. S.Feet Tay 600, Wit the Shits. When it comes to Chicago rappers, a lot of their lyrics are all about violence and death. I mean, just take a look at all the stuff I've talked about so far. And when one side disses the other, ops are compelled to retaliate. Every time someone on one side dies, the other side gets one more name to mock, insult, and demean. This goes on for a while, then more blood gets spilled, and the entire cycle repeats. And this is painfully obvious in Wit the Shits by S. featuring Tay 600. In Tay 600's verse, he said, "Say LA, you get killed in the same day. Lil Mark and Shondale, they got killed in the same way." Both these lines were shots at Lil Mark and the Gangster Disciples, Tookaville to be more specific. Mark was a member of the 051 Young Money Gang, one of Chicago's most violent crews responsible for a bunch of murders in the area. On March 25th, 2014, he dropped a great diss track called No Competition, in which he dissed a bunch of his ops, including L.A. Capone, a member of the Black Disciples who had died on September 26, 2013. Just 3 days after releasing his track. On March 28, 2014, Lil Mark would be murdered. According to reports, the rapper had been hanging out near a bus stop when a silver van would pull up and fire at him over a dozen times, with him getting hit a couple of times in the head. Mark was pronounced dead at the scene, and the van would be found a few hours later burned to a crisp. The timing was definitely suspicious, considering that everyone knew exactly which gangs he had dissed in no competition, but his killer was not found. The fact that it happened just a couple of days after the song was released was something that Tay 600 poked fun at in With the Shits, but Mark's name was not the only one mentioned in the song. Tay also dissed Shondell Tuka Gregory, whose death in January 2011 at the age of 15 hit the Gangster Disciples really hard. So hard that they renamed a part of the GDs to Tookaville in his honor. A number of rumors over the years have suggested that Tuka was targeted by the Black Disciples in response to the death of one of their members named Edric T.Y. Walker. Rappers dissing their dead ops is nothing new, but what happened with Tuka had never happened before. Big players in the BDs like Chief Keef dissed him in multiple tracks, but it was arguably King Von who did the most damage to the 15-year-old kid's name and memory. In his song How I Rock, Tuka Pack, Von rapped, "Smoking on this Tuka Pack and it's loud as Phenom caught Tuka ass getting off the bus. I know Tuka mad as hell. He probably tired of us, but when I die, find Tuka ass and I'ma beat him up." The phrase "smoking Tuka" is now synonymous with smoking a little green, and it became so popular that even rappers outside the Chicago drill scene started using it. If there was ever a list of the most insulted people in rap history, Shondell Tuka Gregory would definitely crack the top 3. Tuka was also super tight with Gakira Barnes, so it is no surprise that she was the one who took Odie Perry out in retaliation. Tuka's death shared something in common with how Lil Mark was taken out. He had been hanging out at a bus stop when he was shot down too. That's why Tay 600's line, "Lil Mark and Shondell, they got killed in the same way," was so effective it reflected a harsh reality for his ops. FYB J Main, end of story. FYB J Main was a renegade Black disciple. He is a member of Jaro City now, a set of the Gangster Disciples full of renegade BDs. When he dropped his track End of Story, the rapper chose to go after one of his most recognizable ops, King Von. In the song, he rapped, "What happened to dude? He got killed in Atlanta. He trying to swing and got hit with a hammer. One survived, but he need a pamper doing all that talking, get smoked on the camera." I have already talked about the events that led to Von being taken out, so I'm not going to get into it again. Instead, I want to focus on the last bar of that verse. Doing all that talking, get smoked on the camera. Von's entire altercation with Quando Rondo and his crew was captured on camera, and it clearly showed him being the one to start everything. This was a really huge deal for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it meant that Lil Tim had the charges against him dropped, as I had mentioned earlier. Secondly, the events of that night bucked a trend with things actually not going in the Black Disciples rappers' favor for a change. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I've already talked about a couple of the murders that Von has been directly or indirectly involved in over the year. If you remember from earlier, law enforcement knew that the rapper had been the one to shoot and kill Gakira Barnes back in 2014, so why didn't they arrest him? Well, it turns out that there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute him, and that there were enough inconsistencies in the statements of witnesses to ensure that he remained a free man. This wasn't the only time that a lack of evidence kept Von out of trouble either. About 5 years after Barnes' death, Von was linked to the murder of a man named Tariq Livet on March 31st, 2019. There is no real evidence linking Von to the death or anything like that, and these rumors mainly live on Reddit. But if it was somehow true, then it would just be another example of Von taking care of business and not having to face the consequences. The point here is that those consequences would eventually present themselves on November 6, 2020, and cost Von his life. When you think of all the stuff that Von has done, including allegedly putting a bounty on FBG Duck's head and celebrating his death, it's easy to understand why someone like FYB J Main would want to target him, especially because he got smoked on camera. So there is no disputing how things went down that night. Memo 600 feet. King Von, Exposing Me. Remix. Exposing Me by Memo. 600 featuring King Von sees the Black Disciples rapper go after FBG Duck, poking fun at the ops he has lost. Von rapped, "Your homie die. I'm smoking that I'm tired of smelling Tuka and Lil Mark, and I'm tired of scrap." If you remember from earlier, smoking Tuka became a way for ops to disrespect both Shondell and the Gangster Disciples. It would happen more often than you would think, so often that Tuka's mother actually talked about how completely messed up the entire situation is. She said her son had nothing to do with the rap industry and added, "For him to be disrespected and mocked for his death, my son was not about that lifestyle. They're the ones who are making him famous and blowing him up like this. You don't even know my son." When you take a look at guys like Keef and Von repeatedly bringing his name up, his mother's frustration makes a lot of sense. Then there's Lil Mark, who died practically right after dropping a diss track, and Von was more than happy to see him go, tweeting, "I live for this the ops, I'm O-Block, with a bunch of laughing emojis. There were even rumors that suggested Vaughn was one of the men involved in taking Mark out. With all of that in mind, it sort of makes sense why the Black Disciples rapper would go out of his way to diss both Tuka and Mark. There's a third name mentioned in the lyrics though, Scrap. FBG Scrap was the brother of Rooga and FBG Duck's cousin. Less than a month later, on February 4, 2019, Duck and Rooga would team up for their own version of Exposing Me, in which the Gangster Disciples member basically said he wasn't scared of O-Block while insulting guys like T-Roy. As I have already mentioned, Vaughn died a little less than 2 years after the release of this track. Memo 600 has stuck to doing his own thing, releasing music as a member of the 600 set of the Black Disciples. After a point, it sort of becomes difficult to understand just what's the point of all these disses, because one always leads to another and the cycle continues. Only problem is it is difficult to tell just where all of it started. Regardless, we got a couple of dope diss tracks out of all of it. Lil Durk, Refugee. A lot of this has been focused on issues between the Black Disciples and Gangster Disciples, but both gangs have other ops as well. In Refugee, which was released on Christmas Eve in 2020, Lil Durk threw shade at a 051 Young Money member. In the song, he rapped, "Gon' shoot, we ain't arguing how you get killed when you partying." The second line was a direct shot at 051 Melly, who was backdoored at a party. Quick lesson here, in this case, getting backdoored is basically getting taken out in a sly, unexpected, or underhanded way. Durk didn't diss him just for fun either. The rapper had real reason to hate Melly, even after his death. Apparently, Melly and other 051 Young Money members were responsible for taking out OTF Nunu on May 31st, 2014. Not only was Nunu signed to Durk's label Only the Family, but he was also his cousin. This allegedly happened in response to the Black Disciples taking out Lil Mark, who, if you remember from earlier, was a member of 051 Young Money as well. Durk's lyrics didn't just poke fun at Melly, they openly mocked his death. The first line, "Gon' shoot, we ain't arguing," saw the rapper basically say that people shooting at each other was just a part of their lives, but getting jumped at a party was pretty pathetic. He was murdered by a member of the Taekwon World gang called Nate 007. Taekwon World is a set of the Gangster Disciples. So let's break this down. A member from the Black Disciples dissed a guy from 051 Young Money who had been murdered by another guy from a Gangster Disciples set called Taekwon World. 3 different gangs with lots of beef between all of them, renegade members, and the threat of violence always lurking just around the corner. And through all of it, diss tracks dropping left and right with some lyrics that would have us asking if that actually happened. And that's our video. If you liked what you saw, check one of these out too. I'll catch you in the next one.